Hello, everyone. This video is a part of series Understanding Auteur Films, based on 3-volume books of the same title. In this video we'll talk about Red Desert by Michelangelo Antonioni. Except a brief introduction of the film, the video has the following sections. The aesthetic challenge of moving to color. What is assigned to color? Intermediate shots and fluid, amorphous objects. Closed space and open space. Meaningless act of creating beauty. Now, let's begin. Red Desert, 64. Michelangelo Antonioni's The Red Desert was the director's first film shot in color. In terms of visuals, this film still looks fresh even when rewatched today, but considering the period in which it was first released in 1964, it can be said to have been an aesthetic innovation in the use of color in film. The colors in this work are not just that the objects photographed are colored. Along with the electronic music, they create a unique story world for this film. Although the story belongs to a modern drama, the world is at times fantastical, has its own logic, and is undeniably beautiful as a whole. In this video, I would like to analyze Red Desert, focusing on this point. The aesthetic challenge of moving to color. Cinema's transition to color was slower than its transition from silent to talkie. Practical color film that could be used to shoot feature films was developed in the mid-1930s. Among well-known color films are Gone with the Wind in the 1930s, and Fantasia, The Yearling, and The Red Shoes in the 1940s. Color feature films began to be produced in Japan in the early 1950s, and were called Sotenenshoku, which means all-natural colors. The historical drama Gate of Hell, 53, directed by Tainasuke Kinagasa, which won the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival, is also a all-natural color film. Many filmmakers were wary of moving to color. Although color film had a 20-year history in 1955, among the world's most famous filmmakers since the silent era only Kinagasa and Sergei Eisenstein had used color. The latter partially used color in Ivan the Terrible, Part 2. Though there may have been other reasons, such as the difficulty in reproducing natural colors and lighting, and the high cost of color film and equipment, it seems to me that aesthetic issues rather than technical or economic issues made filmmakers cautious. There were probably two factors at play. One is the film genre and the other is a realist view of cinema from the late 1940s to the end of the 1950s. Color was first used in historical films, animated films, fantasy, and later in musicals and comedies. What these genres have in common is that they do not need as much chromatic realism as contemporary dramas. The contemporary drama genre around the world was strongly influenced by Italian neorealism films from the late 1940s to the end of the 1950s. Vittorio De Sica's Bicycle Thieves, 48, and Federico Fellini's The Road, 54, vividly portray the lives of contemporary Italian citizens, and increased the realism of the images by often use of location shooting and non-professional actors. It combined a visual reality not characteristic to American epic historical and fantasy films, with modern humanistic drama. For this reason, serious drama in feature films has naturally become associated with black and white images among filmmakers and audiences alike. Antonioni is also Italian, and his first directorial work was a documentary short called People of the Pavali, made in 1943. He continued to make documentary short films for a while after the war, so he is also related to neorealism. The feature film The Outcry, 57, which won the Grand Prix at the Locarno Film Festival and brought him international attention, reflects his experiences, but the main character is a working-class man. It's a kind of road movie. Depending on how you look at it, it may be more neo-realistic than Fellini's The Road. In 1964, when Red Desert was released, I think that the world's auteur cinema had not yet dared to make the transition to color. Dramas, especially those with a strong tendency toward realism, were still shot in black and white. In Italy, Visconti released The Leopard, 63, the previous year, but it is a historical film. De Sica had already moved to color, but both Fellini and Pasolini were still only making black and white films. Around the world, people like Sidney Lumet, Stanley Kubrick, and Akira Kurosawa still stuck to black and white film during this period. After releasing one comedy in 1964, which was unusual for him, Bergman returned to black and white. Making a feature film entirely in color was a huge aesthetic challenge for many filmmakers. If watching the images of Red Desert with this in mind, you can see that the film was something like a laboratory for the author to explore the artistic use of color in feature films. What is assigned to color? As I mentioned at the beginning, Antonioni never used color film until Red Desert. Including the trilogy that made him famous, The Adventurer, 60, The Night, 61, and The Eclipse, 62, the black and white images are clear and detailed. He creates a unique world where beauty, reality, and malaise are mixed. In daytime scenes, the strong sunlight of southern Europe often created a sharp contrast. These characteristics are clear from the first few shots that appear in each film. In the final episode of The Eclipse, the images have come to have an aesthetic value independent of the story. The nature of the imagery in Red Desert is completely different from that of its predecessors. Just watch the first 10 minutes of the film and you'll understand. From the opening credits, a deliberately out-of-focus images of a factory area appear, being overlaid with electronic music that sounds like it could be used in a sci-fi movie. The outlines of the buildings in the factory area are blurred, giving them a somewhat fantastical feel. Eventually, the electronic music stops, and a female voice begins to sing, but there are no lyrics. The camera eventually shows the port and the cargo ship anchored there, but it is still out of focus. After the credits end, the main story begins with a shot of flames burning in the air. The size of the shot changes and we see that the flames are coming out of the chimney. Furthermore, the shot size changes, and the thermal power plant is now shown in a long shot, and we can see that the chimney is attached to the power plant. When humans finally appear, it's a long shot of workers lined up against a wall across the street. As if they were on strike, some policemen walk past them and towards us. A long shot then shows a young woman in a green coat and her young son walking from the other side of the road. We'll see a little later that her name is Juliana and she is the main character in the film. We can tell that the mother and her child are wealthy from their clothing. As Juliana and the child pass the gate and continue on their way, a white car comes and stops near the gate, and a man with a bullhorn gets on the roof of the car and calls out to the other side of the wall. From the content of the speech, it appears that the workers are on strike. The other side of the wall seems to be a factory, and the grass there is bright green, but the buildings are gray. Juliana approaches a male worker who is talking to an elderly man across the road and asks him if he can sell her the loaf of bread he is chewing. The worker looks at the woman suspiciously as she tries to buy half-eaten bread, but he sells her the bread anyway. Juliana moves to a sparse patch of dark bushes, takes a bite of bread, and looks around anxiously. We can see small piles of coke and scattered industrial waste. She and her son walk away among mounds of still smoldering black coke. This first episode treats the characters as if they're less important than a landscape made up of buildings and machines. There are few lines, no one's name is called, and we don't know why the heroine seems morbidly anxious or what the workers are demanding. After the credits, the images are clear in the sense that the outline of the subjects are clearly defined, but the cloudy, hazy weather and the neutral colors of people's clothes and buildings make it monotonous in terms of color. Against this backdrop, only the green color of the coat that Juliana is wearing stands out as a color. The next episode takes place indoors. Juliana's husband Hugo and his friend Corrado appear, and from the conversations between Hugo with his subordinates and the contents of the phone calls he makes to managers who appear to be colleagues, it turns out that the place is inside a power plant, and that Hugo is trying to recruit engineers who can travel long distances by Corrado's request. Eventually, Juliana appears in a building where bright blue tanks and red piping can be seen among the sunken gray machinery, and she joins them. Hugo introduces Juliana and Corrado to each other, and this is the first time the audience knows their names. Juliana tells Hugo that she will be waiting for him in the office and then leaves, and then Hugo tells Corrado that his wife had a slip-up accident on a rainy day and was hospitalized for a month due to mental shock. Through this conversation, the audience learns why she buys half-eaten bread from the worker and has a somewhat anxious look on her face the whole time. She is mentally ill. We also learn that Corrado is a mining engineer and inherited from his father the factory visible from the power plant. It seems that Antonioni is trying to hint at the difference between Juliana's world and other people's world through color. As soon as she appears, the cool and gray colors of the power plant are disrupted by the reds and yellows of the piping. This change in tone is objective in the sense that it depends on the objects in the scene, but it is subjective in the sense that it conveys the heroine's sense of the world. Therefore, in the same scene, the yellow-green color added to the object she is paying attention to, Corrado as seen from her eyes, is thought to reflect some kind of emotion or interest that Juliana had in him. This is confirmed by the fact that when she leaves and Corrado starts talking to Hugo again, the colors change back to colder tones. Corrado eventually begins to sympathize with Juliana, who is unloved by her husband, and they end up having an affair, so the colors in this episode can even be said to foreshadow the development of the drama. In this way, the first 2 episodes quite clearly show that the subjects are not just colored, but the characters' personalities and sense of the world are expressed through colors, giving it a dramatic meaning. However, the subjectivity of the images hinted at through the colors and camera movements in Red Desert has an unclear border with objectivity, to the extent that it could be seen as the expression of a filmmaker liberated from the story. Moreover, when Juliana is depressed, the world around her does not become colorful, but instead becomes gray, so it is not unambiguous. Intermediate shots and fluid, amorphous objects. The first 2 episodes analyzed in the previous section are interspersed with 2 empty shots, one showing the details of a power plant or factory building, and the other showing the entire building. And the second episode ends with a super long shot of Hugo and Corrado, almost an empty shot. This is a part of the video released at patreon.com. To watch a full version of this video, please visit patreon.com and join the membership of the authors page. You can watch exclusive 3 new video about world cinema every month, plus some more videos, i.e. recordings of authors' public lectures etc., only for $2 a month. Your support is very important for our work.